Our stay near Farstad on the coast of the Norwegian Sea was excellent, but they have a rule. Your room must be as clean when you check out as it was when you checked in. After we got our morning chores done, or I should say after Kevin got our morning chores done, we prepared our bikes for today's journey. Like every morning, we were always anxious to see what the day would bring us. Or what disaster would I cause today? On the 7th day of our trip, the road would lead us from Farstad to Steinkjer, about 200 miles. They love their tunnels in Norway, and with good reason. They tremendously reduce the amount of miles a vehicle has to travel to get from one point to another, considering how mountainous this country is. Norway has over 830 miles of tunnels, the third most of any country in the world. The tunnel we're in right now is called the Atlantic Ocean Tunnel. It's nearly 4 miles long and reaches a depth of 820 feet below the ocean surface. Our intercom problems seemed to be getting worse with every day that passed. Each evening, we'd spend a large amount of time trying to fix the problem. Although the intercoms occasionally connected with each other and worked fine, a majority of the day I could hear Kevin, but he couldn't hear me. So we devised a plan that I would flash my headlight or wave my arm to acknowledge whatever Kevin would be saying to me, or let Kevin know I wanted to pull over for whatever reason. Most of the time that didn't work out too well for us. Kevin either didn't notice when I flashed my lights, or he couldn't tell if I was flashing my lights or just hitting a bump in the road, which sometimes caused a bit of confusion.
Were you flagging me down there? No? Oh, okay.
Did you see my arms waving or something?
No.
Oh no, I was adjusting my helmet. It was twisting my ear.
It should also be noted that I burned out 2 sets of headlight bulbs on this trip. For some reason, we couldn't find the road that leads to the hotel we were staying at that night.
It's saying to go that way, and then it kind of just cuts off to the left slightly.
So we blazed our own trail down the walking path to the hotel and called it a day. We woke up the next morning to a quiet but steady pouring of rain, which was ironic because the weather was a perfect match for our mood. While Kevin and I were having dinner in the restaurant last night, An elderly man sitting with his wife at the table next to us began gasping for air. With each attempt to breathe, he became more and more desperate for oxygen. Kevin applied a few hard slaps to the man's back in order to dislodge the food blocking his airway. But it didn't work. I could see the fear of dying in this man's eyes at that point. Kevin then began the Heimlich maneuver, and after the third attempt, the man began breathing again. It was quite a sobering experience to witness. I truly believe that had Kevin not stepped in to help, this man would not have had a chance to experience another day of life. Just a few miles outside of town, our attention was drawn to a huge and tranquil-looking lake. It was the perfect place for the somewhat quiet state of mind we were in at the time. As we rode along the shore of the lake, the clouds above reflected off the mirror-like surface of the water, and it felt like we were riding on top of the clouds. Day 8 of our adventure would take us from Steinkjer to the Arctic Circle, then to our hotel north of the Arctic Circle, about 286 miles. On the way to our hotel, which was only 15 miles down the road, we discussed how this was now the second country in which Kevin and I have reached the Arctic Circle, our first being the Alaska trip. When we arrived at the hotel, we were immediately greeted by the owner as we climbed off our bikes. Without provocation, he began telling us the history of this hotel, how it was built in 1950 on the site of a World War II German POW camp, and when they began construction of the hotel, the bodies of over 100 Russian soldiers were found buried throughout the area. He also told us the road we just rode up on was called the Blood Road, given that name because countless Russian prisoners of war died being forced to build the road in the harsh Arctic conditions by the German soldiers. I've always had an interest in World War II history, and Kevin and I both found this story fascinating. However, we were a bit unprepared to hear such a dramatic and serious story just coming off of a 9-hour day of riding, but the story still sent chills down our spines. As the owner of the hotel began to walk back inside, he turned to us and said, "We serve dinner from 6 to 8 p.m. in the dining room. I hope you'll be joining us." I looked over at Kevin and, quietly mocking the owner, he said,
"And tonight, we're serving last week's guests for dinner."
For some reason, my camera began shooting 2 frames within a split second of each other for each single push of the shutter button. First frame, balcony light on. Second frame, a fraction of a second later, balcony light off. On. Off. I'm not much of a believer in ghosts and goblins, but I figured of all the places I've spent the night in my life, this place would have the most potential to scare the crap out of me. But I was so tired that night, a ghost could have danced an Irish jig on top of my bed all night long and I never would have known it.